We're all familiar with the Lord's teaching here. If someone strikes you on the right cheek and turn him, offer the other. But I think a lot of people completely misunderstand what the Lord is saying, and because they misunderstand it, they dismiss it as ridiculous and don't even attempt to follow it. So let's look about what Jesus says when he tells us to turn the other cheek, what he means by it. And let's start by talking about what he does not mean by it. He does not mean be a punching bag. Let everybody take advantage of you and just let them punch you until you're absolutely blue and bloodied and don't offer any resistance. Let people walk all over you. Not at all. He's not saying be a weakling. Quite the contrary. He's saying be strong. In fact, it takes a very strong person to turn the other cheek. And that's what he's saying. So, for example, if somebody strikes you on one cheek, rather than punching back would be the normal way most people would want to do, saying, oh, good, you hit me on that cheek. How about this one? You want to hit me here as well? With the effect of trying to completely disarm the situation and take all the anger out of it. A perfect example of that was given to us by St. Teresa of Calcutta. Mother Teresa was loved the worldwide, but not by everybody, especially among some of the Hindus in India that still believed in the caste system, where because of their belief in reincarnation, they believed if people were born lowly, poor, ill, they were being punished by the gods because they had lived an evil life in their previous existence, and so they came back in a lower form to punish them for what they did. And of course, the lowest of the low are what they called the untouchables, and those are the people that people would feel very comfortable doing nothing with because they figured the gods are punishing them. Who am I to stand in the way of the gods' justice? Of course, Mother Teresa, not being a Hindu, being a Christian, and not believing that for a moment, as certainly we don't believe in that, went out and took care of them. And a lot of people were upset by her for that because they thought she was thwarting the justice of the gods. So with that is the story of one day she went into a bakery and she had a little child with her, and she asked the baker if he could please give them some bread for the orphanage. And the baker was chewing on some bread himself as she was speaking to him. And as soon as she asked him, his immediate response was to spit the entire contents of his mouth all over Mother. And Mother simply responded by taking out a handkerchief, wiping her face, and said to the man, "Thank you for that gift from me. Now how about something for the children?" And he was so moved by that afterwards he apologized to her and gave her bread for the orphanage every single day after that. It takes a strong person to do that. Most people would probably have just turned to the guy and say, "How dare you do that to me? I'm only trying to do good, blah, 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 filth and filth," everything else that would have happened. And the guy would have yelled back, and then this person would have yelled back and forth, and somebody would have run out of the store. Maybe even it might have led to fisticuffs. And the person ran out the store, and they both would be angry for the rest of the day and ruin their day, and nothing would be settled. But Mother, by not letting it get to her, by turning the other cheek, was able to dissolve the situation, completely diffuse it, and then bring that man over to what she wanted him to do. And that's what Jesus is telling us to do in our world today, in turning the other cheek. Not let people take advantage of you, but be strong. Don't let their anger get the best of you, and rise above it and show them peace and compassion even when they are angry with you. And do we not know that so well from the beautiful prayer of St. Francis? Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. And he got that, of course, from the Lord and what he's saying here. And that's the challenge for you and me that the gospel gives us today. And in our world, we know how much we need it. There is so much anger, so much vitriol, so much fury going around, people against people, that it almost seems today that we've lost the ability to respectfully disagree or have a constructive conversation where we can understand one another and maybe even reach a compromise. The political world, forget about it. I mean, they've just lost it in there. But sometimes we find it even among ourselves, in our workplaces, among family members, in schools. Sometimes, sadly, even in the household of faith, we find people who can be so angry with others. And they naturally respond as if anger is the way to get what we're looking for. But if we look at it, it doesn't work at all. And I tell this to children a lot. when I'm teaching them. It's like when Jesus talks about turning the other cheek. I said, okay, let's say some kid punches you in the face one day. Well, what's the natural thing we want to do? Punch them right back. So we do, and does the other person say, okay, well, you punched me, I punched you, now we're even, shake hands and say, let it go? Well, of course not. That person punches back, and then you punch back, and it goes back and forth, until one is so bloodied and beaten that they can't possibly fight anymore. And that person, the other one, may have won the fight, but has anything been settled? And it's going to come up again the next time they see each other, and nothing has been settled by that anger. And of course, if it's in the school, it's happening at school, you're going to be brought into the principal, and both of you are going to get punished until eventually afterwards you say, I'm sorry, we shouldn't have done that. So I say to the kid, you've already received that one blow. Nobody can take away, he can't take back the punch he gave you. But by not giving the other blow, you preserve yourself from not getting further blows so that you're not beaten to a bloody pulp. And maybe the other person, by seeing you not fight back, might think twice about his own anger. And that's what the Lord wants all of us to do in everything we do. It doesn't take any strength of character to fight anger with anger, but to fight anger with compassion. Now that's a different thing. And a lot of times, certainly social media makes it too easy for this to happen, because people in other situations, if they were seeing somebody face to face, their anger they might mitigate because seeing the other person's eyes, they might tone it down a little bit. But when all they have to do is type words into the computer and press the send button, my goodness, you've all seen the stuff out there, the horrible, evil, nasty things that some people write about other people simply because they disagree on something. And sometimes it's not even a moral issue, something great. It's maybe even a process, how we go about doing one thing or another, somebody's administrative decision or anything like that. Sadly, we see how so many victims of it. For example, last week, hearing about that very sad case of the girl in New Jersey, the high school student who took her own life because she had been so bullied in school and on TikTok and other things that she just couldn't endure it anymore. And lots of people were looking at it wondering, how did it get that way? Why do children act like that? Why are they so cruel to each other? Yet the question we also have to ask ourselves is, are we ever guilty of the same? Are we just as cruel to other people as we criticize in anyone else who does that? And that's the challenge for us today, to look into our own hearts and say, am I ever guilty of doing the same thing? And especially in the household of faith. I know a man who has a blog, website, podcast, whatever you want to call it, different angles to it. And he talks about matters within the church. Unfortunately, he comes across as a very angry person. I don't really know him personally, so I don't know what type of a man he is. But he basically seems to look like he goes out to find people doing things wrong in the church, and he sets himself up as the right person, the one who knows all the truth, who's sent by God to blast all those ignorant people who are not doing it right. Whether it be local priest, his local bishop, even the Pope himself. Now, it's perfectly okay to disagree with policy decisions by a priest, the cardinal, the Pope himself, but calling them names and trashing them in public is not the solution to how to get people to believe them and follow them. Even fighting about, or this guy will get up there and talk about the big bad Pope and all the horrible things he's doing. Well, you can disagree with him, but please, for mercy's sake, with charity. And I've often thought, this guy probably has a big following, a lot of people who are as angry as he is, and he just rallies them around him to help stir their anger, and it further feeds that anger and makes people more and more dislike the Holy Father or the Cardinal or this priest or that or whoever it may be. But all that's doing is further polarizing things, making people more and more angry with each other. And I wonder if anybody who listens to his podcast, listening to him, says, you know what, that changed my mind. I'm going to believe him. I'm going to follow him, and I'm going to do so charitably. That's not going to happen. And so it is a real test of character for us to respond to people in a charitable manner. Priests, especially pastors, get constructive criticism and correction from people quite frequently. Thankfully, lots of the time it's done with great affection, with great charity, and saying, Father, I disagree with your decision on this or that. Maybe we should still do it this way or that. And they talk to you, and it's very easy to listen to them and perhaps even reach a compromise. Hear the other person's side of the story, and if I might agree with them, I say, okay, I hadn't thought about that, let me look at it. But if I still feel like, no, I understand what you're saying, but because of this, this, and that, no, I still think this is the best way to go about it, that hopefully we'll at least understand each other and leave with respect and peace. Unfortunately, not everybody is like that. And every once in a while, somebody will bring something to a priest's attention, with all the anger it seems they can muster. Really nasty words and things. And lots of times when that happens, most people, when somebody just sends an angry letter, they usually just throw it right in the garbage and say, this is bullying and I'm not going to tolerate it. And so they just ignore the person. I don't know how many people honestly change their mind because somebody sent them an angry letter. And maybe when people do put something on a website or in a letter, they pour out their, use both guns and everything and give all their ammunition against the other, they might frighten them into not wanting to respond for fear of getting any more of that person's anger. But does it heal anything? Does it bring any conclusions? Are we able to reach a compromise? Do we understand one another? Not at all. And so I always say, whenever I have to respond to somebody, especially when it's an angry letter or something like that, I try to make sure that I respond point by point, forgetting the anger and just talking about what the person is saying. Even if they're saying something good, in the midst of all their anger, there's a good point there. I might say, all right, you have a point well taken there. Let me look at that, whatever. I do also at the end, which I think is fair enough to do, that we hear in the first reading, if you must correct somebody, do it with charity. I might, tell them at the end, I think, in the future, it might be better if you presented this with a little more charity. Came across very angry, and that's usually not the best way to do it. The old saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So please, you have good things to say, but try to tone down the anger. And just bring it respectfully, and we'll have a lot easier chance to understand each other and move on with maybe a happy compromise or solution that we both can accept. And before I either send it in the mail, if it's a snail mail letter, or press that send button, I always like to ask myself, and I encourage everyone to do the same thing. Before we press that send button, even if it's just responding on a blog somewhere, an answer to somebody else's question, will Jesus be pleased with the way we responded to that person? Would he look and say, well said? You answered that maturely, respectfully, responsibly, and peacefully. And I'm very proud of you. And you showed people the right way to go about trying to heal a difference and bring concord where there is tension. Or would he just shake his head at us and say, you just fought fire with fire. You did to them the very same thing that you're angry at them doing to you. And that is a challenge for us. It takes a person of great prayer, of great character, of great growth in holiness before the Lord to be able to do what St. Teresa of Calcutta did with that baker that day. But that's the challenge that the Lord has for all of us, to do that. And when we do that, we realize the gospel is really a challenge. It's not for wimps. It's not for weak people. In fact, we have to be strong to live things out the way Jesus tells us to do. But if we can bring that ourselves to do that, if we can be those strong people, we will start making a difference in the world. With Lent beginning this week, maybe if we haven't thought of anything in our lives that we say, I need to work on, maybe that's something we can all look at. How do we respond to other people with whom we have a difference of opinion? Do we respectfully disagree with them, or do we blast their boat out of the water just trying to silence them? It doesn't take any strength of character to be angry at somebody who's angry at you and to fight fire with fire. But it takes great character to be strong and turn the other cheek and not respond in kind to people who are angry with us, but respond to their anger with love and compassion. That's what Jesus tells us to do when he says, turn the other cheek. Let us pray today that we find the strength in the Lord to do that, because if we can do that, then indeed we will be examples for the rest of the world, and we will show them how to bring peace in the very divided world that we have, that is filled with so much hate. May Jesus Christ be praised, now and forever.